Look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Good news, Jake. I don't know if you know this, but we're back here for another episode, ready to rock and roll.
As long as I'm not the last to know.
Hey, yeah. So you're the second to know. Actually, you're pretty high up on the list. You're like a big deal.
What I'm shooting for is just to be high on the list, because number one, you got a target on your back.
Exactly. So if you're number two, then you got someone to hide behind. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I just want to be remembered is really all it is. Just a mere mortal here, just wanting to be remembered and wanting people to know who I am. So, anyway, I'm super excited. We're here. We're back. This is the Watching Comics podcast. Welcome to all of you first-time listeners. If this is the first time you've ever listened to us, you are welcome here, but probably not a great episode for you to start with because we're in the middle of Jessica Jones Season 2. But we are super glad that you're here. If you are a returning listener, welcome back to the well. We're really happy you're here. We're hoping that this episode lives up to your expectations. And if it doesn't, then you need to reevaluate because we're doing just fine.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, it's certainly not a problem with the quality here. It's a problem with what you heard.
I call it like I see it, and that's just the way it is. And it's our podcast, and we can say that, right? Or does that make us horrible people and everyone's turned it off by now?
I mean, can't it be both?
Okay, well, that's cool. I mean, it gives us some street cred that way.
I actually got my first angry emojis on Twitter today, and I don't know what part, because it was a really long, rambling tweet that, like, this person decided to send me. If I'm interpreting emojis correctly, I think they want to punch me in the face, and they're flipping me off.
Oh, that's awesome. So Good news is you got the electronic bird flip, which is like, welcome to the club. You're officially an internet inhabitant now once you've been flipped off on Twitter, Jake. So this is a big deal.
I kind of was excited. I was like, all right, it's over with. Good. We're done. Now we can just move on. You
always remember your first time. That's special. So I need a little bit more context here. So obviously you sent something into the Twitterverse from your brilliant encyclopedic knowledge of comic book lore. I'm certain is probably what it was about. And clearly you were either drunk and wrong or you were right and the person responding to you is drunk and wrong. Which was it?
Well, I mean, I'd like to open with, again, two things can be true. I was probably drunk and right, but I think if I'm reading it right, because, man, I swear I'm only 32, but I had kids a few years ago. And so my knowledge of the real world and pop culture, all paused.
Because when you become a parent, time both simultaneously stops and then completely ages you all at once. So you're old and immediately forget everything that's relevant, but then you're also in this massive standstill because you're just in this bubble of I don't know what I'm doing. I just have small children now.
Right. I go to Best Buy now just to ask people where the cassette tapes are. But yeah, I sent out something about, because it was last night while I was watching through Jessica Jones to get ready for tonight. And I sent out something about, kind of my thoughts on the future of the Netflix Marvel shows. And, I don't know which part upset this person the most, but I think season 3 of Daredevil needs to be what it looks like it's going to be, which is an adaptation of the story Born Again.
Which is arguably the single best arc in the Daredevil lore.
Oh, it's so good. Everybody always wants to point to that Elektra thing, and that's really good. Don't get me wrong, but Born Again is it's so brutal though. I don't own enough tissues.
It's really good. And I don't know if I've been as public with this as much because I'm such a massive Superman obsessor, but Daredevil is my low-key second favorite superhero, and I actually have a fairly decent amount of Daredevil comics in my collection. Nothing compared to Superman, of course, but Daredevil's got a rather impressive showing, and I can say that I completely agree that that is the single best like series or moment just from the straight comics of Daredevil. I just think it's clearly number one. Nothing else dethrones it. So you would think that's where the show makers want to go eventually. Like that's got to be a pinnacle that they have.
Well, yeah, that's got to be like, I don't know. That's got to be where it's headed. And I don't think that's probably not what upset this person. I then did say that Iron Fist could be completely scrapped. So maybe this person was a big Iron Fist fan. I really think like Iron Fist is like as bad as it gets on Netflix. And I think that it was a horrible misreading of, and you know, the showrunner then goes on to make that well-regarded classic of television, The Inhumans.
Oh yeah, because everyone's heard of that because it had such a great, illustrious, award-winning run.
Yeah, you know, it really, they only did one season because they're like, well, we've said all that could be said here. You know, it was just so perfect.
I will say that Iron Fist is one of the worst pieces of high dollar. I'm attempting to create prestige TV installments I've ever seen. Like it's really, really bad. And I think it's all across the board, just universally panned, where it's one of those things where like people that don't watch comic books but enjoy high quality TV don't like it. People that are the deep dive comic book nerds and really want something special and appreciate it, they don't like it. And then people in the middle ground, they're just like, yeah, I watch the superhero stuff, but I don't really follow along with the comics. They don't like it. Like it was bad, and I don't think it's a bad thing to call something bad when it is that level of bad. Like we're observing a true thing, not judging it. And especially if there's going to be something where we have multiple versions or multiple chapters or representations of something within a larger arc. So in this case, we have the Marvel TV series, and we've got multiple individual titles plus the joint forces of the Defenders, right? And then you've also got like Marvel Runaways on Hulu and then Legion on a regular network and stuff like that. I'm taking all that. So if you're going to have that many individual shows, one is going to have to come in last place, right? There's always going to be one that isn't as good as others. There's like a doctor graduated last in his class. Just like that stuff happens. It's a real thing, okay? So Iron Fist graduated last in its class from the Marvel TV series. Like that's it. That's fact. Done.
With the notable exception, there's that one episode in the middle that was directed by a member of the Wu-Tang Clan. I forget which one.
Only the Wu-Tang Clan could almost resurrect Iron Fist.
Well, it's that one where he's trapped in the building and he has to fight his way out, you know, like, and it feels like the rest of the show should have. That show should have been this giant gross love letter to like 70s kung fu. Mm-hmm. And it should have been just a shameless cheese fest in the best way, you know, where like I don't know. And that episode,
they didn't do that. And they also tried to make it like, I don't know if prestige is the right word, but they tried to make it gritty and like relevant like the other shows are, and they failed at that too. Like that's what makes it even more frustrating is it could have been really cool this other way, but then they didn't even deliver it right in the way that they tried to deliver it.
Well, and this will be my final word on it, and then I just don't want to get depressed, so I can't linger on Iron Fist because I had such high hopes for it. But if the final villain of your Kung Fu series is an old businessman holding a gun, you have gone wrong somewhere from point A to point B.
Something is not right. It is not okay.
Yeah, that's not a showdown worthy of Bruce Lee. Let's just put it there.
Yeah, not even close. So there's no entering the dragon there. But
back to television that doesn't suck.
Yeah, back to television that doesn't suck. Jessica Jones season 2. So before we go any further, we need to say a couple of things. Number one, if you have watched all of Jessica Jones season 2, then you're good. If you haven't watched up through episode 8, stop this podcast right now and go catch up because there will be spoilers. Otherwise, what the heck are we going to be talking about, right?
Right.
Number two, is if you are joining in this conversation for the first time now and you are caught up to at least episode 8, but you didn't listen to our first episode, go back and listen to the other one, and you can hear us rehash season 1 and then season 2's first 3 episodes. And it sets the table, if I do say so myself, beautifully for what you are about to hear and enjoy today.
Yeah, it's a lovely appetizer before the main course.
Yeah, it's like, it's not just mott sticks, it's like fried cheese with homemade sauce level good. So here we go. We are talking with spoilers, Jessica Jones season 2, episodes 4 through 8. And then next week we will bring you the end of the season, and then we will lay Jessica Jones to rest until she gives us some more amazingness. But quick little recap. Jake, tell me if I'm wrong. Because, last week was a long time ago, and as you said before, we might be right, but we also might be drunk. So I'm going to say that our main takeaways from last week were, number 1, season 1 is arguably the greatest thing we've ever seen on Netflix, especially in the Marvel canon, but like in the upper echelon of Netflix awesomeness. Mm-hmm. Number 2, we knew going in that it was going to be really difficult to follow up a season that was as close to perfect as season 1, but season 2 seemed to come out of the gate sluggish, really taking its time. Some things were worthwhile, some things were not, and it seemed like they were a little overly enamored with trying to get so many storylines teed up in the early goings, and it just kind of stalled what mattered most. But number 2, it still felt like that with the mental health angle, the imperfect characterization of just shared humanity, and the filming of the film noir factor, that there was still an awful lot of goodness there, and it was still high quality prestige TV, just not quite up to the level of season 1. Did I miss anything?
No, that feels about right, and I'm glad you opened that way, because I think that sometimes you really pick apart an A- paper more than you do like a D+, because your expectations are so high and most of the content is so quality that you really nitpick and you can really dig deep into what didn't work in hopes of pushing it through to a better grade next time. Whereas that D+ is always going to be Iron Fist. And so I think that I'm afraid as we approach this tonight that I'm going to overanalyze and sound like I don't love this. So I think it's important that we open where you did by saying that even if when all is said and done next week we close the book on this, if this season is not as good as the first season, it is still already 8 episodes in, better than 95% of things you could be watching. And it's still totally worth the watch. And you were right to sing Kristen Ritter's praises last week. It's well acted. It's well directed. And the whole thing, start to finish, is just awesome. So if I nitpick tonight, please, listeners, do not think that I am saying you should not watch Jessica Jones season 2.
I couldn't agree more with you. It is high quality television, absolutely high quality. And it's what I love the most is I think outside of Christopher Nolan's 3 Batman movies, this is probably the best representation I've seen of allowing me to enjoy my superhero fantastical inclinations alongside something that is inherently human, authentic, and realistic, but those two things blend together beautifully and they don't seem disjointed or phony. It feels actual while I still get a good dose of that supernatural or fantastical beyond human ability type stuff. And I think that's what keeps me coming back to it the most. That and the intelligent writing. I think it's written pretty well, but it really blends those two things together super well. And I think that's probably a good main theme for episodes 4 through 8, is because seasons 1 through 3 was just teeing up. And all we had at the end of it was, these were pretty good introductory episodes, but where the heck are we after watching 3 hours? And we added another 4 hours onto that. And not only did it ramp up at an incredible pace, but it really is a great testament to say, I think Jessica Jones' strongest point, besides Kristen Ritter's performance, because she's phenomenal, I think the strongest point is is there anything else from the superhero genre that toes that line of, yeah, we've got crazy superhuman stuff going on, but this is also maybe the most gritty and real thing as far as humanity is concerned in this arena you're probably going to watch. What do you think?
Well, I think that I think Luke Cage started to approach it, and I mean, we haven't had a chance to really talk on this a lot. Luke Cage is like two separate shows for me, and the real cutoff there is halfway through, spoilers, when Mahershala Ali's Cottonmouth gets killed.
Yeah, it felt really early.
Yeah, and I get what they were going for, and I applaud the bravery it takes to say we're going to do something new and different. And it makes me sad when something brave doesn't work, but it didn't work. And until he goes out, I think Luke Cage is this really fascinating look at different responses to growing up in poverty. It's almost Black Panther before we get Black Panther. It's a look at race relations and at external factors, determining somebody's future. And there's a lot of that in there. And Cottonmouth was this really fascinating contradiction of a character. And then he got killed, and it kind of went off the rails a little bit as a show and wasn't sure what it wanted to be. And so I think that was probably the closest we got.
And also, I mean, Mahershala Ali was by leaps and bounds the most talented performer in that cast too. So it's really, I mean, the guy's been in practically everything that is of high quality in the last couple of years, and he's got an Oscar to his name, and he's getting ready to do True Detective season 3. Like everything the guy touches is gold, and so it's like you're gonna remove him for half of your season and hope that it still picks up steam is a big ask.
Yeah,
I just don't know if it delivered on that latter half.
Also, how weird is it? True Detective, we thought was going to be the thing that would save people's careers, and now Mahershala Ali's coming in to save it. Interesting dichotomy there.
I think it probably should have just ended with season 1, which is maybe the best single season of television I've ever seen.
It's so good.
It's really, really good. So, Jessica Jones, give me one of your biggest takeaways from these next 4 episodes 4 through 8. Big takeaway.
Okay, I'm going to come out cold-blooded.
Gloves are off. We're going there.
I need Jerry to die. And you and I texted about this just a little bit, and then I stopped because I really do like to come into these sessions that we have, like I like us to not necessarily know where the other one's going so that listeners are getting genuine reaction from us.
Okay, so can I give you a fun little like inside thing that most of our listeners aren't probably going to track with, but I really want to tell you. So when you started texting me all of your trash talk about Jerry, it was on the night I had actually started getting those texts. I was picking up our mutual friend, Jared Wiley. Shout out, Jared. And he and I were on our way to the theater to go see Ready Player One together. And he saw me checking my phone, and he was like, "What's so funny?" And I was like, "You'll get this." Said, "Jake and I are in the process of watching Jessica Jones season 2 together, basically. And right now he's trash talking me about things that he doesn't want to happen that he thinks is going to happen." And we had a good laugh, and it was just really great to be in that moment together. So you can know that when you were texting me about all your hatred for Jerry, Jared and I were having a good laugh.
Well, and it's not, I don't hate Jerry. I thought that in season 1, she was such a brilliant foil for Jessica, and it set her up really nicely for a redemption story. I really enjoyed it. Season 2, I feel like my fear, and this is what I texted you, and now, knowing what we do now, I don't think they're going to go this way. But what I texted Mitch was, like, I'm standing, I'm literally washing my hands, right? And it hits me. I'm going to remember the moment forever. And I pick up the phone and I immediately text Mitch. And I was like, IGH is going to cure Jerry and give her superpowers, and she's going to be the villain this season, isn't she? And like, I just got so angry because I was like, what corny writing that would be. I expect so much better.
It would be such the lazy way out, wouldn't it?
Oh my gosh, it would be so bad. Oh, it would be, I mean, that would have been really boundary pushing writing in 1975. And to I don't know. It really would set us back a couple of, like, jokes aside, not 75, but more like 95. It would set us back a couple decades in our superhero or writing. And it's
let's stay on Jerry for a minute here. Let's try to project, okay? Because last episode I said I think they're attempting to humanize her in a way that I don't think is appropriate because they want to do something big with her later, and I'm not sure I'm on that ship yet with them. Like that's the only thing that I think is maybe a little unwelcome out of everything they've introduced so far as I'm concerned. So, she thinks she has a plan together to get healed. Yes. Is where we're at right now. And she's currently hooking up literally with the battered nurse from IGH.
Yes, because I mean, yeah, she's got ALS. What worse could happen?
So here I want to know what happens going forward, because I want to give Jessica Jones the benefit of the doubt and think that they're not going to go like maybe season 3 she's the villain. Right. I want to think that they got to come up with something a little bit more complex, but it's like, what else is left? Because if she gets healed and she has this new lease on life, but she's also digging up dirt on her partners, does the law firm eventually dissolve because they all just like fizzle each other out with all the crap they know about each other? Or does she take over the whole thing and become kind of like a female kingpin in this world? Like, what? I don't even know what's going to happen going forward, which is, again, really I'm so not emotionally involved with her whatsoever. Yeah. And she's the only portion of this season that I'm not really interested in as far as writing is concerned. But they're clearly wanting to keep her around for the long haul unless they do something completely out of left field. So it's like, I guess what I'm saying is I'm a little worried about what the heck her character is going to look like going on in the future. But that is quite literally my only worry for the show. I'm confident in just about every other facet.
Well, so the reason I say I need her to die is not because I hate the character. The reason I need her to die goes back to, you and I talked last week about with what dignity and honesty and fairness they have treated issues like abuse and like mental health, and that this show has built so much trust and goodwill with its audience in how it has handled these really difficult topics, and to then introduce something as brutal as terminal disease, as ALS of all of them, and then to give us the Deus Ex Machina would really, to me, and I think that's just it, whether it is her becoming the villain, which is worst case scenario, or let's stick with what's more likely now, because here we are at episode 8, she's trying to work things out with this guy in prison who she thinks can heal her. And if she gets healed, to me, it's cheap. And it fails to look at this issue with that dignity and fairness. And it pulls a punch, which this show has never done with us. And
they had all this prime real estate to play with, and instead of going through the thick of it and exploring it, it's like they took the bypass and took the fast way around.
Yeah. And it's just, does it ruin the show for me forever? Do I suddenly say, well, screw Jessica Jones as a show? No, absolutely not. But it does become that stain on the show, and it does become that moment that we look at and we're like, oh, man, and what was that all about? You know, it's Poochie from Simpsons.
And the thing is she's a great actress.
Yeah.
I think Carrie-Anne Moss has had a very diverse but very weighty career in the choices that she has made in some of her iconic characters, and she knows how to play dichotomy. She knows how to play icy, and she knows how to play wounded but strong. And those are all compliments. And I think that those are chops that she brings well to the show. It's just the way they're writing her character arc just has me not investing very much in my care bank for her. You know what I mean? And yeah. And as of right now, the only thing by episode 8, the only thing that she's completely linked up with the main narrative, which is the IGH thing, the only thing she's linked up with is this concept of she's now officially hooking up with somebody that used to work there, and she may or may not get healed by this healer. But all that literally just happened, like it seems like in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
she's
really
not
quick.
She's not really heavily involved in this piece yet, and so I'm interested to see how that evolves as the episodes go on.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know. I think right now, episode 8, I feel like they've written themselves into a corner, and I don't know how they're going to get out of it, and that's disappointing to me.
Mm-hmm. I want to jump back one episode into episode 7, and I just want to talk about this one episode for a few minutes. I think I tweeted this out on the Watching Comics Twitter actually earlier today, saying that I felt like episode 7 almost it seemed like it could have been a season ender episode. Then I thought about it a little bit more and realized if that could have been a good season ender, but then if that's where the season ended, I would have been really disappointed because with how slow the first part of the season would have started. But episode 7 was the flashback episode. And I thought it was really, really good. And it might be my second favorite episode of the whole series so far.
I really, really liked that episode, and I did not expect to, because speaking of lazy writing, I have a real stick up my butt about when people are like magically related to one another. I almost, and these writers keep proving me wrong, because I started to get grouchy when Killmonger in Black Panther ended up being his cousin. I started to be like, man, not everybody has to be, you don't have to, like, I feel like it talks down to the audience to assume we won't invest in these characters unless they're related. At the same time, this mother angle with Jessica Jones pops up, and I started getting grouchy about it. And then episode 7 hit, and it totally changed my mind on it. And now I'm on board. So I'm with you 100%. It is a brilliant episode.
It was absolutely wonderful. And what's really interesting is it also gives you, the mother episode was humongous, and I don't want to underplay that, but it also gives you a massive window into different aspects of character that both Trish and Jessica carry that I think are going to be very important as this season progresses, because obviously Trish is suffering from superhero FOMO, but also has a massively addictive personality and is getting a little bit more and more out of control. And so getting that taste in episode 7 is giving us that little bit of familiarity with that, because I think we're getting into that slow fade towards that again. But then also just the utter heartbreak of a once fragile and tender, deep feeling Jessica was incredibly poetic for all of the right reasons, even if there were a few moments that flirted with cliche. But I want to say, like, what's really interesting about this whole season is it seems like they've kind of taken the story of Logan and Wolverine from the movies and the first season of Dexter and kind of fused them together. This concept of like, I was in this place and I was experimented upon against my will, and now I'm trying to trace my lineage, but then I'm also discovering that part of my lineage is I'm directly related to something that's really, really horrible, and then it's going to create a problem for me with this decision I have to make of, do I go with the thing that I'm related to, or do I go with what I know is right? And that's Dexter season 1. And they've kind of taken those two big swinging bat moments and pieced them together. But I guess what I find myself so fascinated about is the difference between film and television, because it seems to be the inverse with film, right? Classically, when you've got superhero narratives, the first movie is the one where you get origin, and then a lot of the time the second movie is typically the better one because you've established all that other stuff already, and then you can go and just play and have fun and do good stuff. And the second movie is typically more critically acclaimed. TV's always is always the other way around. That first season is like they just put you in the middle of something and they get you hooked with the formula and a way of attacking things, and you just kind of go. And then season 2, it's like, well, what do we do with season 2 now that we've got all these viewers? Well, let's scale it back and let's discover the human side of whoever our main character is. And it's just really interesting that those two mediums have two completely different ways of unfolding things, but that's the way we're programmed to follow. This season is obviously doing that. But I thought the second half of episode 6 and all of episode 7 was like, holy crap, all of a sudden they're just they're putting the gas pedal to the floor. And I loved it. They're great episodes. And I love the way the narrative unfolded and the way they decided to just kind of go back with a certain sense of backflash and connection in episode 7. But what's really interesting to me is how they just decided for the first 3 episodes to really just kind of drip things out as slowly as possible. And then they just decide, for 60 minutes, right in the middle of everything, they're just going to say, okay, rip off the Band-Aid and let the floodgates open and just go. And I'm glad that they did that, because the season desperately needed it to get back to its real chops of why we really love Jessica. But also at the same time, I'm like, why wasn't this trickled a little bit earlier on? I don't know. Like, I don't want to say I'm unhappy. It's just really interesting to have that drastic of a shift be so abrupt in the middle of the season.
One other thing that I also really loved, and it was so brief, but it was a really big moment to me, was the way that they handled the relationship with Jessica's mom and Carl, the doctor that experimented on them. Because part of what I think took season 1 from great show to like one of the greatest shows was that, as despicable and horrible as Kilgrave was, as completely irredeemably evil of a character as he was, in that episode where she's in the house with him thinking about trying to redeem him, you get this really solid look at how people, like, it's a really believable look at how people can fool themselves into defending their abusers. And I saw shades of that in the best way with Jessica's mom defending Carl, who really doesn't come across as that bad a guy. It's not like Kilgrave, who's like oozing evil at every moment. But then Jessica, and I'm sitting here kind of like, wow, maybe he's not that bad a dude. And then Jessica's like, he experiments on people who can't give consent. I'm like, oh, right. That's why he's bad. Yep.
There's so much gray, because it's like because he's also going out of his way to say that he won't sell himself to government testing, right? Like, so it's like he's got some scruples there. I think we'll see what the latter portion of the season carries, but it seems like this season is going. It's the complete opposite of season 1, where season 1 was very binary, good versus evil. Yeah, we all have fractured pasts and we all have our baggage, but ultimately it was Kilgrave and Jessica. One was white, one was black. You clearly know, right? And this season seems to be remove every ounce of binary that you've ever once conceived in this world, paint it with all the shades of gray you can possibly think of, and just wrestle with the nuance. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that's good, because I need to see where it ends up. But I'm excited about that potential. It's definitely a bold move, but I think it could end masterfully if they do it well. But clearly, they're taking, as you said, they're taking a very big, courageous risk, because obviously Jessica's mom's not a conventional villain. There's a lot of gray there. The Dr. Carl, there's a lot of gray there. Jerry, they're still trying to make us love her. There's a lot of gray there. Trish, there's not as much light as there was, so there's a lot more gray there. Malcolm is just swimming in the gray ocean, and so is Jessica, So it's like, I don't know if we're going to get that big hang our hat on this reckoning of good versus evil that we're so used to in the superhero world. But with this thriving so much off of the fumes of film noir and detective and being thrust into really difficult circumstances, I'm not sure that maybe the binary is perfect for this show. So maybe this season could end up taking us to a really good spot.
Well, I think that's the strength of the Netflix avenue is you don't have to go with the binary because, when you only have 2 hours to tell a story, it's a little more defensible to say we're going to really kind of reduce the conflict here to something a little more overt, something a little more digestible. Giant purple man comes from space to destroy reality. That's 2 hours worth of entertainment. Woman confronts her abuser and wrestles with whether he can be redeemed or not, makes the ultimate hard choice to kill him for the sake of his other victims. That's a gray area, and you can't really squeeze all that into 2 hours. I mean, you can, but excuse me, with all the other trappings of the genre, it's tricky to squeeze all of that in.
Exactly. Okay, so any other takeaways from episodes 4 through 8?
Yeah, I wanted to come back around, and we've talked about her a little bit, but I wanted to come back around to a discussion we had last week about the need or lack thereof for a central villain, a big bad, if you will. And now that we've kind of got one forming, and again, there's 4 or 5 episodes left, so maybe it's not going where we think it is, but it looks, as of the end of episode 8, like the big bad for this season is sort of Jessica's mom. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that she is, do you think that that's how they're trying to set her up for, and you said there's shades of gray in there. Do you think we need that? Do you think she's doing it well? I don't know. I just kind of wanted to revisit that conversation with more info.
Yeah. So, I'm going to take a leap here, and I could be completely wrong. Because as we learned with episodes 6 and 7, that a lot can change in a short period of time. Yeah. But I made this connection earlier. I'm getting so many flashes of Dexter season 1 with this. And it's a good thing. I think Dexter is one of my all-time favorite TV shows, and the first 4 seasons of Dexter is as good of premium TV as you're going to find from the aughts. It's really, really good. But for those of you that haven't watched Dexter season 1 in a while and need a refresher, or haven't watched it and don't care about getting a couple spoilers, spoiler alert for a show that's over 10 years old. Dexter season 1 is about a guy who's a serial killer, feels like that he can't control those urges. It's against his nature. That's the way he is. And so he was raised by a father who was in the police force and raised him how to have a code and basically how to be a vigilante. And so he's a serial killer, but he only kills people that deserve to be killed and have had a chance to be caught by the police, but the police missed it or they failed. So he kills like pedophiles and other serial killers and drug pushers and stuff like that. So he's the ultimate anti-hero. He's someone that you can root for. And the big twist is he actually works for the Miami police force as a blood spatter analyst. And so there's that crazy bit of where he's got access to all this information. Well, anyway, the whole big premise of that show or that season is there's a serial killer running amok in Miami that they're chasing after, and Dexter slowly realizes over the course of the season that serial killer is his long-lost brother that he had forgotten that was still alive. And at the very end, he comes to grips with his brother, and his brother kidnaps his stepsister, or his foster sister, and basically the serial killer brother makes him choose. Do you want the family that you were forced to be raised with, or do you want your blood family? And Dexter ends up killing his brother, saving his foster sister, and choosing the side of the way he's known, the way he has lived previously. But the closing shot basically of the season is him breaking down and weeping for the first time maybe ever, because he always talks about he doesn't have emotions, breaking down and weeping because he killed his brother. All that to say is that's every time we're getting more of this mother-daughter thing. And all of episode 8 was basically just Jessica saying, I don't know what I should do, if I should spend more time with you because I was gypped out of 17 years with you, or should I turn you in because you are literally out of control and you are stronger than me and it can get bad. And the mom is aware of that too. So I keep getting those flashes of like, I wouldn't be surprised if we're standing here at the end of the season and Jessica's decision is between, something that is like saving Trish or the life that she knows it, or and having to do that by killing her mom or going with her mom and turning her back on everything that she was fighting for the last few years. And that's just where I think it's going, but that just may be a little bit too on the nose and a little bit too convenient. But obviously there's going to be a big decision. Jessica is going to reach a crossroads where if they've done the writing correctly, it's going to be really gripping, but really difficult for us as a viewer to even stomach making that kind of a decision. And she's going to have to make one. She's got like 4 episodes to get that done.
Yeah, I think that I think I can see it going that direction, and I think that that's, if you're right, which I think you are, because I see it thematically headed that way. I think that's an interesting way to subvert the traditional superhero storytelling. I think it's a really fascinating way to take what we're used to and kind of turn it on its head. And I also think that I agree. The first season of Dexter is one of my 2 favorite seasons of that show. And I think that it's a great, I think it's a great season. And I think that this would be an improvement on that, even because Dexter's brother Brian doesn't really contain the shades of gray that Jessica's mom does. And she's definitely a victim. Jessica's mom clearly has that rich emotion and wants to be the mother and wants to patch things together. But because of the experimentation, there are certain triggers where she is physically incapable of suppressing the absolute superhero nature rage and murderous lust that she's got. And that's the big X factor. Like, that's literally out of her control as she turns into this psychopath that can destroy anything with her bare hands. Yeah, and I thought that was, to make it not that it's this uncontrollable rage as a side effect of the surgery. That's a really interesting take on it, because it's not even necessarily her choice. And we'll be able to debate all day, and I'm sure Jessica and her mom are about to, how much of it is her choice and how much is her, being out of control. I don't know. But it's another layer there that I did not anticipate, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm definitely along for the ride as we enter this last week of our watch through. I'm really excited to see where it goes, because again, I just groaned when she called her mom, and then as they unraveled it and explained it, it got me totally on board, and I'm completely 100% along for the ride.
Most definitely. It'll be interesting to see if we are headed for this horrible decision where Jessica has to choose basically between like the life that she knows or the life of her mother. I think that does speak to some greater themes that would be consistent with what we've seen so far. Obviously, season 1 was ripe with this concept of guilt, both of things that she could control and couldn't control. But basically, she kept coming back to this concept of, I'm the common denominator of everything bad that's going on around me. I've ended lives. I've ended horrible relationships. And then whether she had good feelings for him at any point in time or not, and whether she still had horrible feelings for him, she still had to kill Kilgrave. And it would be really interesting to see if that was carried through in this season and see how much that haunts her as well, and see if that's a common kind of gritty, darker theme with Jessica's arc, is this concept of whether it's her fault or not, she's constantly being put in these types of situations that superheroes should not have to be put into, and that's what constantly tests her relationships and her mental capacity.
Yeah, it's definitely... Man, I can't say enough good about where I think it's headed. I don't know. Maybe we come back in a week and I'm just pissed, but
right, we'll see.
Jerry Hogarth was the villain. But no, I think that it's headed in a good direction. I also, just for one other takeaway, I still think it's stuffed a little too full. I think that Trish's...
They gotta dump Jerry, man. Like,
yeah.
I feel like she's the fat that needs to be trimmed off the prime rib, because it's like I see what they're doing with Trish, and I think where they're going with it is going to be really good, and I'm going to enjoy it. But I also still feel like it's a little bit too much, and I think it's just because there's just so much jam packed in there. And it's like, mute the Jerry a little bit, and then I think I would be completely here for the Trish bit, because there are times where I find myself watching the Trish bit and I'm like, really right now? But then I'm like, no, because what they're doing is really, really good. I think I just may have a little bit of fatigue because it's just too full right now.
Yeah, and I think fatigue is a good word for it. I just, I think that Trish is a harder character to like these last few episodes, and I know that's the point, but it doesn't help any to know that that's the point. And it doesn't make me not tired of watching her go back to that inhaler and just be really self-destructive. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm not saying that Trish can't have her own stories. I'm just saying, do they need to take so much time here? Do they need to have as much focus? Like, I just think it's starting to slowly become the Jessica Jones and Trish show. And that's not necessarily a good thing. I'm also worried that I'm watching a backdoor pilot for a Patsy Walker Hellcat show, which I just don't really like. I feel like the character of Hellcat's been redeemed by the Jessica Jones show. Let's not push it farther. Marvel, if you're listening, I know you are. Let's not roll the dice here again. But I don't know. It's okay. Like, I'm not trying to drug addiction. It's an interesting story. We've seen it a million different times. We've seen it better. We've seen it worse. It's not a thing I inherently have a problem with. It's just, there's so much rich storytelling going on with Jessica. I don't understand this insistence on exploring these other characters who are at their best when they're with her, and just a shadow of their interesting selves when they're not. It's a storytelling choice that is confusing to me when there's so much material to work with elsewhere.
I almost wonder if we're going to get a little bit more of a glimpse of Trish floundering without Jessica around, and that may be a big point of the season. We'll see. But because she's episode 8. Yeah, it is episode 8. She just flounders and eventually completely alienates Malcolm, we think. And so I almost wonder if Jessica and Mom are going to run around and have a couple episodes of this whole Jessica, Mom, we need to figure our shit out thing. Trish isn't going to stop being Trish, right? If anything, she's going to be ultra Trish, and it's going to get ugly for her. And so that, I guess we just keep saying this, and maybe it's a cop-out, but we'll see by the end of the season if that's a big takeaway, which is like Trish, like you said, Trish is stronger when Jessica is around, both from just a narrative standpoint, but also just as the premise of the character. And maybe that's supposed to be a takeaway for the season. I don't know, but taking your comments and looking at them through the lens of episode 8. Episode 8 was definitely the most manic she has been when it wasn't a flashback.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, did she and Jessica even share screen time in episode 8 at all?
I don't think so. And I was actually just wondering that.
Yeah. And so I'm hoping that's a takeaway instead of just like what you said, which also could be a dueling leads here. So I guess we'll see.
Well, and I think you nailed it last week when you talked about it's as if there is this equation they're trying to balance where you're trying to make every character equally important and maximize their screen time in relation to one another. And I think that might be where my issue is it's the amount of time being given to these subplots. And as opposed to, because I think most Netflix shows, not all, but a lot of them, even the best ones, you can always say that probably could have been one episode fewer. Like we probably could have trimmed the fat a little bit there. And I just feel like all these, we're going to hit 13 episodes with this thing. And I don't want to be here next week talking about it was almost perfect, but it should have been 12 episodes, because then I'm going to be able to say, well, we could have cut back the amount of time spent with Trish and Jerry.
Exactly.
And
I felt that way with Mindhunter, just as an example. I don't know if you've watched Mindhunter yet.
I haven't yet.
Okay, so I actually want to, if you're feeling a little bit and want to try something, if you do watch it, don't watch the pilot. Don't watch the first episode. Just watch episodes 2 through 11. And I would love for you to do that. I would love to get your feedback and then watch the pilot and then see if you felt like you missed anything. Because when I finished Mindhunter, I was like, okay, not the best show I've seen in the year, but definitely in the conversation for my top 5, possibly top 3 if it wasn't for that just horrible first episode.
Interesting. Well, okay, now you've given me a new challenge.
But anyway, that's immediately what I thought of when you mentioned that, which is that concept of like, okay, it is possible to have the highest of quality television shows and still have a glaring moment of imperfection, is what I'm saying. And I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. I talked to an awful lot of people that felt the same way about Mindhunter, maybe not for that specific detail, but felt like, man, it was really, really good, but it still felt like there was 1 or 2 things that kept it away from being like the greatest show of 2017. And still being in like the top 5 greatest shows of 2017 is really good, but it felt like it could have been Breaking Bad level, and it just wasn't because of a few small mistakes. And I think one of them was a bad pilot episode. And so we're going to find out with Jessica Jones, like, are we going to see these threads either tie up together or fray enough for us to feel like that it was worthwhile for those 13 episodes, or are we going to get that 13th episode and say, wow, should have been 12? I think either one of them is completely in play at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I mean, this is just me. My wife will tell you, every book I've ever read, she goes, how was it? And I said, oh, it was really good. It probably could have been 100 pages shorter. I think everything goes on too long. And I don't know if that's like, I don't have as long of an attention span as I think or what, but I think everything could be just a little bit shorter, except The Sopranos. We could always use more of that.
and Watchmen, the graphic novel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that has been, do you know about Doomsday Clock, right?
Oh yeah. I've got the first issue of Doomsday Clock.
I'm waiting for it all to come out in trade. I was going to read it as it came out, and I just hit that point where I was like, I want to do this one we'll see if I hold out on that. Any day could be the day where I cave and go pick up the back issues.
That's ultimately what I'm going to do, is I'll probably just read it all in one sitting, because what I did was I got a first printing of the #1 for my collection, and I've read
smart.
it, and I'm probably never going to open it again, and it'll sit there in my collection and be amazing, but I don't think I'm going to go get all the single issues. I'll just go and read everything all at once when it's available.
That's smart.
So, but anyway, so give me your grade for Jessica Jones season 2, episodes 4 through 8.
I think I'm going to give them a B+, and that's I'm grading it on a hard curve because of how good season 1 was. If it weren't for that, it would probably be an A, and that might not be fair of me, but it's how it's going to be. I'm going to say a B+.
And I think I gave it a B+ last week, the first 3 episodes. I'm going to go ahead and give it a solid A-.
Okay.
Just because the way that they really ramped it up was refreshing, and damn, episode 7 I think deserves an A rating.
Yeah, I would agree. Episode 7 is I'm right there with you. It's among the very best. It's certainly the best episode of this season so far, and I think it's among the best episodes that the show has done yet.
Awesome. Any bold predictions for the last few episodes?
Get ready, America. Here comes the Hellcat TV show.
Really? You're going for it?
I really think they are, because I didn't think they were truly going to do Punisher as a show. And then based on the response that character got, I think they're testing us. I really do. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think Netflix is like watching Twitter to see what the response is to Trish having her own adventures and problems, and see if they could do this thing.
That's really interesting. And I didn't think about that, but you are absolutely right. Like, I'm so glad you said that right now because that makes so much sense. The Punisher bit for Daredevil, I had forgotten about that because I haven't watched the first season of the new show yet, so it's not really on my radar. But yeah, because I remember thinking back on it now when they announced that Punisher was going to be in season 2, that actually carried through the internet much more positively than I thought it would. I was expecting a lot of pushback, and it seemed to be, even before the show dropped, universally, people were stoked for it. And then, of course, it came, and it got really good reviews, and people loved it. And I kept waiting for the internet to do what the internet does, and it didn't. And clearly Netflix was listening, and I haven't read a ton because I want to avoid spoilers. The few spoiler-free things that I have read that I have trusted about the Punisher standalone has said that it's worthwhile and it seems pretty solid. And so that's pretty incredible that you've brought that up, and I think that's totally appropriate with the Hellcat bit here. They could be listening, and based on the response, we could get another home run swing and see what happens.
So, have we ever talked about my weird problem with the Punisher?
I don't think so. This would be new to me.
Well, so here's the thing. Aside from the obvious that he's clearly just an attempt to cash in on Death Wish, I also think that the Punisher, I don't understand why it's an ongoing story. Like, I think he has to die. And
he's just a dude with guns.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that. But I also think, like, if he dies, if the Punisher goes down in a blaze of glory at the end of his first story, trying to kill the people who killed his family, it's a Shakespearean epic. If he keeps coming back trying to figure out ways to kill Magneto with a bullet or get Doctor Doom with an explosive, now it becomes a running gag. And there's a moment...
It's Looney Tunes at that point.
It really... Yeah, and there's a moment in an X-Force comic from about, I want to say 8 years ago, by Rick Remender, where Deadpool was in X-Force at the time, and they go to this dystopian future where everybody is like being killed by superheroes who've gone too far, and the Punisher is one of them. And Deadpool like pulls him aside and goes, Frank, I got to talk to you. And he's like, hey, I just want you to know, I hate everything about you. I think you're a ripoff of Charles Bronson, and we're all going to be better off when Marvel figures that out. See you later. Bye, buddy. And it's absolutely how I feel about the character.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I definitely think the Shakespearean aspect of it is what makes it interesting.
Yeah.
It's very operatic, but yeah, that really seems to be all he's got going for him in terms of how is he attractive in a different way in the concept of a superhero narrative when he's just another, man, I don't want to say it this way, maybe it's a really horrible thing to say, but he's just another person that lost his family.
Yes,
and
but didn't they?
And even
all?
More so, he does it. They all lose their family, but then this guy's just got guns, yes. Right? Like that's about it, right? Am I missing anything? Like,
no, that's it. That's all there. And it's like he faded, and then the 90s happened, and he came back, and we're just never going to be rid of the guy, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting is, I just think back to when I was younger in the early 90s, and I remember the Punisher arcade video game. And I remember Mortal Kombat, I remember Mario, I remember Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I remember Superman, and I remember Punisher. And Punisher was clearly, at least at this time, in one form of mainstream media, Punisher was by leaps and bounds the darkest option out there. Like, the intro to this video game was incredibly disturbing with death. The whole concept was really, really dark. The even as campy as it was, the Dolph Lundgren movie was shot very dark and very gritty. You know, and it's just like, that seemed to be his lore in the 80s and 90s. Well, they didn't really evolve his character or his narrative at all. And now that we're in the world of thriving with dark, introspective, emo, depressing, and horrible dystopian future stuff like that. All of this stuff seems to be flooding most of the superhero narrative that we've got, that it seems like the one thing that he had left in his quiver that Punisher had that no one else had was this: he was going to go one shade darker. Well, now I think everyone has surpassed him. And so now it makes him even a little bit more bland, because it's like you had this darkness thing where I really had to go to a dark place to get into this story. But now I get that dark place when I watch and read Batman, of all things. It's kind of like, I'm not sure that he caught up with that. And so now I'm just sitting here wondering, like, okay, you're cool at a certain level, but at the same time, it's like, what makes you special and what makes it worth my time beyond a couple fleeting moments?
That's a really good point. I guess the question is there a place in the world for Frank Castle when that world also includes a Batman that will shoot up a warehouse full of people to save Neck Snap and Superman's mom?
Exactly. Because Martha. But yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. Now, granted, again, I'm going to say this: I have not watched the first installment of his.
Yeah, me neither. Might be freaking awesome, actually.
So it might be freaking awesome, and we may completely change our tune. I'm sure we're going to get to it for this podcast sometime in the near future, but that's where we're at for now. So anyway, Jessica Jones season 2, still worth watching. I'm excited to see where this ends. Obviously, the ending is going to dictate whether this particular season is an A or a B. But I think I'm confident in saying I will be pleased more than I'm not. I think it's going to be all right. I think they're going to take care of us, Jake.
Yeah, it would have to be a really bad last stretch here to make me not like it. I think the real question for me at this point is, will I like it as much as I liked season 1? And if I don't, that's okay. It doesn't have to be as good as the first season to still be great.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. All right. Well, that is it for the midpoint of Jessica Jones season 2. Hit us up on Twitter if you want to get at us with your hot takes or flip Jake off some more. I think he's open to that. We are at Watch Comics Pod, at Watch Comics Pod, and comics is spelled with an X. We are also on Instagram at Watching Comics Podcast. And then we are online. Check out our website at watchingcomics.com. You can send us some fan mail there, or episode ideas or anything. Next week we will be coming at you with the end of Jessica Jones season 2, but we'll need some episode ideas for after that. So if you've got any ideas, send them our way. Jake, am I forgetting anything?
No, I don't think so. Appreciate everybody listening. Rate and review us if you're feeling like it. We always appreciate the feedback. And yeah, I think let's crowdsource some topics here. If you guys got something you want to hear us blather on about for a while, let us know.
Boom. Let's make it happen. And we will come at you next week.
We'll see you later.